Welcome to A Girl, a Guy, and a Buffy podcast, Small Bites edition. I'm your co-host, Kate Balzer.
And I'm Charles Swint. So our Small Bites episodes are discussions we had in the main episode that didn't quite fit the overall conversation, but we still wanted to share with you all.
We hope you enjoy these tasty conversational bites. We promise, no angry puppy scars from listening. So in this Small Bites episode, we are discussing Spike's attraction to Slayers.
So why does he have such a, what do they say? They say something like he's got a yen for the Slayer.
Oh, wait, I had that quote somewhere. So it's in Fool for Love where Angelus tells him, like, if you don't behave, the Slayer's going to come after you. And Spike says to Buffy when he's telling her about, how he killed the two Slayers, he says, after that, I was obsessed. I mean, to most vampires, the Slayer was the subject of cold sweat and frightened whispers, but I never hid. Hell, I sought her out. I mean, if you're looking for fun, there's death, there's glory, and sought all else, right? I was young. So that is the quote.
That's where he's
about why he went after Slayers. I mean, I think for him, it's a challenge. Like the personality he decided to take on when he became a vampire and realized he could shed the things about himself that he didn't like as a human, was, he became a brawler. Like he changed his accent. He became more like rough and tumble, working man's kind of vampire, versus Angelus's artistry and, going for the long-term sort of kill. And Spike's like, no, let's just get in there. Let's mix it up. And so, of course, like the ultimate challenge for a vampire to his mentality, to his thinking, would be a Slayer, which it totally makes sense.
Right. And I mean,
if you want to be the best, you want to go after the best.
Well, and he also, like, the sort of like artistic poetic side didn't really work for him in his real life. So why not go for the, like, basically the exact opposite, which would have been sort of your sort of workaday kind of guy. And, and I think too, like, this whole idea of like, oh, like for vampires, the Slayer's like, the boogeyman, who'll come out to get you. Everyone knows about it, but no one's really like, this mythical creature that like everyone knows they exist, or like you think they exist, but no one's really ever seen one, or very few have seen one. So, it's one of those things. And so when he actually runs into one and then kills it, it's like, yes, that's great. And then he gets, and because it is this mythical thing, then you get all this like street cred. It like totally amps up his game in his community. It's a great status symbol. I mean, it's a huge status symbol for him to
and he
go
does
after
it
them.
So relatively young as a vampire. I mean, he's only 19 years as a vampire when he kills his first Slayer.
Right.
And like, he's like, hey, even you, Angelus, have never done that. And you're like 100-something years older than me.
And also, like, Angelus is such a like renowned vampire by this point too. And so it actually is the first time that he kind of gets something that's his.
Yes.
And it's something that no one can take away from him.
Right. And I think also that you see in those flashback moments with Drusilla that I think she sees him with her own interest too for the first time.
Well, it's it's an impressive feat to do. Like, it's like,
for sure.
That's the thing. And it's like, oh, and the fact that you can kill two of them in your lifetime, that's that's such a huge thing. So much so that papers are being written about you. So like you're infamous, not only like in your community as a vampire, but like as, in the world of the occult, like you are an anomaly.
Right. I mean, it gives you a nickname, the Slayer of Slayers, which tells you how infrequently someone kills multiple Slayers.
Sure.
I mean, not to make light of the fact that he killed two Slayers, but he only killed two and he's getting like known for that.
Right.
Well, because he's killed 5 over the years or something,
Well, and it's curious to see like how many, because we know there have been so many Slayers, like how did the others die? Like at whose hand did they die, and why aren't they given sort of that much sort of credibility? And it's like, were they all just sort of killed off randomly by some random vampire?
Yeah, I'm sure it's a mixture of like sacrificing yourself in a big, apocalypse versus being taken out on a nightly patrol, depending on how good the Slayer is, the age, the experience. And we also don't know. I mean, Spike could have encountered other Slayers and either decided they weren't worth worth going after. Like maybe they were brand new and he's like, yeah, whatever, that's not a challenge. Or he lost a battle and decided to retreat, or, he couldn't find the Slayer. Like he was in China and she was in the US or something.
Right.
But I think that first time around, it's just really for like the challenge.
Hmm.
And seeing that he can do it, going after this mythical being that even Angelus is like, yeah, I'd rather avoid. But I think when you get to Nikki Woods, there's definitely that element. But I mean, he's been around for close to 100 years at that point
Right.
as a vampire, and he's found who he is. He's also kind of really, you can see obviously he grows. I mean, and he really delves into and I think finds his tribe in the punk movement.
Hmm.
And so I think there is much more of, as he says when he explains it to Buffy in Fool for Love, it takes it to the next level. It's not just about taking down this mythical creature. Like he's dancing with Nikki. There's
Right.
something going, like it's starting to turn into something more than, oh, I just have to go after the best of the best.
Right. Like he's definitely in like I mean it's almost a fetish at this point. Like
Correct.
it's very much a like not only do I want to fight you, but like I want this to go on. Like I want this thing to keep going on. I'm gonna like I'm gonna like edge with the Slayer here until this like gets through. And so it's very much it sort of goes back to, his this whole idea of like the obsession and being in love with the Slayer. And quite frankly, I think there could have been a situation where had circumstances been different with Nikki, I think he could
Mm-hmm.
have been into Nikki. I think he
Oh
was kind of
yeah.
like feeling it a little bit and kind of wanted to see where it went.
Yes, I totally agree. And, I think as well, it really shows you that Spike has, for all his flaws and his toxicity and being driven by the demon, he actually really respects women. He sees the Slayers as like these amazing warriors and he appreciates them as women warriors. It's not a versus like a Warren situation. I don't think he's coming at it from like that resentful
Right.
um sort of incel mentality that Warren has. It's not like I gotta take down the woman, blah blah blah. Like he loves and appreciates women. And
Right.
this is like, you are the ultimate.
Yeah.
And we're going warrior to warrior. Like I have respect for you. Yeah, I'm gonna take you out because I'm also like have no conscience. But
Also because it's what we do. Like it's like
yeah,
vampire
right,
versus vampire slayer. It's like
right.
it is the ultimate fight, but it is
Yeah,
also kind of like the ultimate way to get off on like
yeah,
killing your ultimate enemy. There's an excitement to that. There's a seduction to all of that. This, sort of cat and mouse thing. And yeah, there is a respect for it, I think. That which is why I think he keeps seeking them out, where he's like,
yes,
I want to. Also, I think too, on top of that, they have said like the blood of a slayer is like the
right,
tastiest.
right.
And so I think there's a little bit of that goes into that too. Like, oh, I
Yes.
can't wait to like. So again, it's very. There is so much of like a sexual thing where it's like, oh, I want to get into that. I really want to taste that. I want to like taste that juicy blood or whatever that is, like whatever he's getting into
Mhm.
around that. But also, in order to make it satisfying, there's got to be some foreplay first.
Yeah, which is why I don't think he has that with, and I do not know if I'm pronouncing her name correctly, but Jingrong, the Slayer in China. It's very, and I think he talks about that in Fool for Love. It's much more like by the book. There's not quite the level of like passion. I mean, he's having fun with it, but she's very like, I'm just here to take you out. There's not
Hmm.
the dance yet. But then he gets to Nikki and there's the dance, and then he really accelerates that with Buffy.
Right. And it's yeah, and so I think it's like, oh, you found somebody again, like, and which is an interesting thing to be like, slayers in America have a very different how we slay in America is different how we slay in China. Like it's so
Yeah. Well, you
you
also have like time difference too, and
yeah. And also it makes it feel like she was very much trained by a watcher, like by the book sort of situation where it feels like because of people like Nikki had a kid, and so you couldn't necessarily train by the book because the book doesn't apply to you. And
Yes.
the same with Buffy, like the book didn't apply to her. So I think I think some of that is makes it a little bit more exciting. Like I'm a vampire and I don't play by the rules, even though there
Hmm.
aren't really rules for vampires. But then you've got a Slayer, you're like, oh, you're kind of bad too. Like I like
Hmm.
that. Let's see how bad we can get together and
Yeah.
see who comes out on top.
Yeah, I think it's just another extension of Spike's passion and obsession that we see come out in other ways, particularly with his relationship with Buffy, but his relationship with Drusilla as well. I think this is just another component to it. He just focuses it on these warriors. And, it'd be interesting. I don't know, based on who Spike is, if a Slayer was a guy, if he'd be as driven.
Mm,
I think you can make the argument that the fact that these are women is a good part of what attracts him
sure.
to going out to fighting them.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I mean, again, just in the time that it's written and all of this other stuff, there's very
Yeah.
much this sort of heteronormativity that
Yeah.
happened, which is also very weird to put that sort of limitations on beings that are soulless and that don't have souls and are sort of, but you can anyway. That's a whole other story where you can play around with it with women, but you can't with men, and then all this other
Yeah.
stuff. Anyway, except that one time that Spike and Angel fooled around. But so yeah, yes, I think it would be very different. I think it would have been a very different sort of thing. I also think that there's just sort of the psychology around it, right? Like the psychology of being able to play the game. I think it would have been interesting, but I don't think it would have been as sexy to Spike. I do think that there is some like sexiness around all of it, but I don't think it would have existed had the Slayer been a man. It would have been fun. I think it probably would have been more like manipulative and calculating as opposed to like, come on, love, get close to me. Like, come on, like rub up against me. Like, I think that this part of like the demoness inside of you is like, yeah, I want to kill you, but I also want to fuck you first. Like, it's kind of that sort of situation where it feels very much that, where I think if the Slayer had been a boy, it would have been very much like, I want to kill you, but I'm going to have fun doing it.
Yeah, I can see that. Although I do think if Buffy was written now, Spike would be more gender fluid and
Yeah,
he'd be more
absolutely.
queer. And so I think there would be an element of him expressing that sexiness. But I
Yeah,
agree, of its time and when it takes place and who was writing it, I 100% agree. If
yeah,
it had been a male Slayer, it
yeah.
he would have been more about not the mind games in the same way that Angelus was, but he would have had fun like taunting more is I
Hmm.
think a better word.
Yeah,
Taunting the Slayer, but it wouldn't have the element of like you said, I
it would have been more of a bromance than like,
yes, then I want to I want to sleep with you.
yeah, yeah. I think it's an interesting idea. Like Spike today, written today, would have been much more gender fluid. I think
Yeah.
they all should have been, like, really,
Yes. Yes.
honestly. But that's another story for
It was
another
of
time.
its time. That's
Um,
for sure.
yeah,
So that's why I found very frustrating the Angel episode. And sorry guys, I didn't say this in the beginning, where because Spike crosses over to Angel, there'll be some spoilers for Angel episodes. But so the Angel episode of Damage, when they discover Dana, the Slayer, who's in a mental institution. I mean, and again, I think this is an example of where the writers not knowing who Spike was because they didn't write for Buffy really shows. I mean, the fact that Spike had no sense that she might be a Slayer, come on. Like,
it's
I,
weird that they like, yeah.
yeah, I mean, like I could understand maybe at first, but I feel like he was written that way on purpose, and it just knowing
Well,
who he was, it just feels so wrong and out of character.
Well, it's super inconsistent with everything else that has
Yes,
ever happened on Buffy ever, because every vampire
correct.
who runs up against a Slayer is like, "You're a Slayer.
Yes,
I have this intuitive nature knowing that you're the one." So it's
right.
weird to be like, "Oh, I don't recognize this." Like, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. it doesn't. And when she like speaks to him in Chinese and he's like, "Oh, Chinese water demon." Like he may not know Chinese, but I feel like it was like one of the greatest nights of his life
Right. He
when
should have.
he would kind of remember, like he might not know the words, but he might get a sense of like the saying.
Right.
It would, so that always like bugged me.
Or that you're speaking Chinese. Oh, I remember I killed a
Yeah.
slayer and oh, you clearly are having a psychotic break and are,
Yeah.
you know,
I was like, he would know. He would eventually figure it out. And actually I think it would have been really interesting because it would have shown the contrast between Spike and Angel, that Angel had to use his now big company and the research to figure it out, but that Spike being on the streets, like using his intuition experience, would eventually like know who she was because he's been around Slayers so much and he knows Slayers,
right.
like the back of his hand.
Well, and Angel should have known better too,
Well,
honestly.
yeah.
I mean, come on, Angel. Like, I mean, you know that this is what's going on and you see these drawings and all of this other stuff. Why would you not put two and two together more quickly, knowing what just happened? Like, this
Right.
is a recent canon event
Right.
that has occurred. Why would you not why would you not jump to that conclusion?
Yeah.
That's the first place I'm going.
Right. I mean, I think it also speaks to, sorry, the showrunners, because like the showrunners should know. And somebody should have been like, if the writers didn't, fine, but like showrunners should know the like history of the shows because
Right.
the universes are so intertwined. And
Yeah.
that's just, as a fan, that just feels like it
Right.
could have been done much, much better.
Yeah. I mean, I like the episode. I just think I think they could have handled
Yeah.
it better.
Yeah. I'm talking mostly about how Spike discovers, or the
Yeah.
fact that he doesn't figure it out on his own.
Right. It's also a weird episode. Why are we just chopping Spike up? Like, what's the point in that?
Yeah.
It's a weird, the torture
Yeah.
scenario of it all is kind of weird. But if anybody wrote for that show and wants to chime in, would love to hear your thoughts. For
We
the
would.
justifications on
I'm
all of
laughing at
that.
Charles, not at you coming on to share our thoughts or your thoughts. Yeah. So, I
Shamelessly
mean,
plugging all the time.
you know,
People come on our show.
exactly. That's
If
what
you
you
want to
gotta
come on
do.
our show, just hit us up.
Exactly.
Anybody. It doesn't matter.
I know. Anybody. Random guy off the street who's never seen the show.
Who's never seen the show before.
What do you think about Spike and his attraction to Slayers?
Right.
So any other thoughts on Spike
Oh
and
God,
Slayers?
yeah. I'm also curious to see like what I mean, we saw what Faith did when she switched bodies with Spike, but I am curious to see like I'm interested to know had Spike and Faith met earlier
Mm-hmm.
in the timeline in their own bodies, what that would
Oh,
have looked like.
ooh, that would have been like putting gasoline on fire.
I know. That would have been so hot. That's the
That,
fanfic I want to see. Spike and
yeah.
Faith.
Well, I say that, but I actually don't think they would have. They might have connected like to cause trouble, but I don't think they would have connected sexually because Spike is too much of an emotional wants a relationship,
Right.
and Faith was not in that
Right.
place.
Right. That's
It's
true.
like, yeah. So I think that way they would have clashed, but trouble they would have been like all the way when it comes to trouble.
So
Yeah, it
much
would have
fun.
been fun to see them like meet up in season 3 before the body switch,
Yeah.
having had that happen.
Just a random.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting that the first time they really meet as the, well, in this case, more as herself, is when they've both been through their redemption arc.
Right. Right.
So there's definitely like, it's funny, there's more of that sexy connection, but I think it's almost more like two friends sharing tales.
Well, I definitely think that like I think you're right. I think had they met earlier, they would have hooked up.
Yeah.
They totally would have hooked up and they would have wreaked havoc or whatever.
Yeah.
But it definitely would not have been like an emotional relationship. It
No.
would have been a good fling. It would have been a good like summer fling where they but at some point they probably would have betrayed each other.
Yeah.
And done all that stuff. But it is nice to see them together sort of on the redemptive side of
Mhm.
everything. Sharing battle scars and all of that stuff.
Hmm. And the conversation is funny because Faith still has the image of Buffy as the good girl, and Spike's like, "Oh no, let me just tell you
All the things that we
all
have
the
done.
things." There has been a change. She's been through some stuff.
If I was your girl, all the
Yeah.
things I'd do to you.
I know,
Oh, yeah.
exactly. Which is like so much the fun of that scene. And it's really interesting too, because I think when Buffy comes down, as much as she's worried about Faith, I think there's also an element of her being worried about Spike. It's
I,
like Faith is mine.
well, I think I mean, there's a little bit of jealousy, like, oh, here's like you're going after
Yeah.
another one, like Spike is mine. Like we're not together, but like
No, no, no. I'm saying Buffy feels that about both of them. Like Spike, don't take Faith away from me. Faith is mine. And she's saying to Faith, like, don't take my not a boyfriend.
oh, I would think that she was more worried about Faith trying to take her, not a boyfriend, than Spike taking away Faith from her for any reason. Because I think like I think yeah, she's glad she's back and she's there, but I don't think that Buffy has the same sort of like attachment to Faith.
No, I agree, but I think it's more like she's my nemesis. Like I don't want you to have a connection to her.
Oh, I don't want you to have a connection to my nemesis.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a little bit of like both of you are mine and I want to keep you separate from each other. I'm not saying it's a romantic sexual thing with Faith,
Right,
but I think
right.
it's like also I think you two be trouble, but it's also like she's stolen boyfriends from me in the past, so that's definitely her concern with like Spike. But I think she's also like, I feel like you two would get along too well. I don't want Spike to be with hanging out with Faith either.
Influenced by you.
Yeah.
We don't want you all relapsing together.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. No, I think it's definitely more like protecting her territory from Faith, but I think there's a little bit of like she's my nemesis, stay away from her
Right.
as well.
She's trouble, don't talk to her. Like,
Or like she's mine to deal with. Um sort of way.
yeah.
Plus it's like another Slayer. Like I'm your only Slayer.
There's jealousy there. She's totally jealous. She's
Definitely is
totally jealous
jealousy.
of that situation in that scenario.
Yeah,
Knowing
absolutely.
everything that has happened, like she
Yeah,
knows what happened during the body swap. You know that Spike had a conversation with her
right.
about that.
Which they at some point talked about because he
Yeah,
knew that
yeah,
Faith.
that was definitely
Um,
pillow talk or
yeah,
rug
I
talk or
was just
whatever.
gonna say that.
Rug talk. Um,
Be like, hey, he probably brought it up to her. It was like, what that time you told me you'd ride me like at a gallop, and she's like,
oh,
what are
that
you
wasn't
talking
me.
about?
She was like, that's so not me.
And then she would reveal, oh no, that
And
was
then she
Faith.
was like, but it can be. There was probably some faith role play in there
Oh my
somewhere. I
God.
don't know.
I don't know if Buffy would be in for that.
Who knows?
I don't think she was in the headspace for that at the time, but yeah.
Who knows what they got into? Because honestly, like the way they make it sound, it's like they did some pretty like off color things that
Yeah, for sure.
um that definitely involved handcuffs of some sort.
Yes.
Um, for sure. We know that much. That much we know to be true. Um,
Yes.
that there was some bondage involved in their relationship.
Yeah,
So um
absolutely. Well, and obviously his attraction culminates in his relationship with Buffy. So,
right. So he finally gets his brass ring, as it were.
yeah. Yeah, I'm curious to know because we don't really get, obviously anything related to Slayers other than the Damages episode of Angel. So, now that he has his soul and he's on the side of good, I mean, he certainly lost his obsession with Slayers, but, I'm sure there'll always be some little bit of attraction
I think
to Slayers.
I think he knows Slayers. I think he's
Yes,
definitely has
yes,
like I think if there was a thing where it was like, oh, we need to talk to somebody who really understands like the
yes,
mindset of a Slayer, I think you would go to Spike.
right.
Like if there was some situation where they needed to do that. Although, you know, again, because she does, I mean, she does go to him for that very reason, to
Right.
understand herself better. But now that there are so many of them, what does that mean? Like in terms of his relationship to Slayers?
Well, it certainly changes it because it changes the meaning of what it is to be a Slayer. You're not alone
Right.
in the world anymore. So
Right.
that definitely changes.
And you're no longer like this rare commodity.
Yes.
And his relationship to good and evil and
Right.
his value system has changed. So
Yes.
that makes a difference between his relationship. And so he's probably less, I don't think he is like, you know, has the obsession or the yin for the Slayers like he did before. I think that sort of got scrubbed clean when, you know, once he died. Any other thoughts on Spike?
Attraction to Slayers? No. I mean, you know, like we discussed in his relationship episode, you know, because of getting a soul and where he ends up at the end of season 7, just like with his romantic relationships, as you said, he's kind of cleansed of some of that aspects of who he is.
They're scrubbing bubbles.
And, you know, becomes more actualized. So he doesn't need to be obsessed with Slayers. He's a fuller person now.
Right. He's got a grander purpose.
Correct. Now. Yeah. He has more meaning in his life and more people in his life too.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Small Bites. Let us know your thoughts about the episode by leaving a review or rating us wherever you listen to your podcast.
You can follow us on Instagram and Facebook at A Buffy Podcast and email us at abuffypodcast@gmail.com. Thanks so much for listening. Bye.
Bye.